Good afternoon, and thank you for attending this session on educational publishing and the importance of local publisher. I'm delighted to be joined this afternoon by two very distinguished publishers, Maxwell Wahome from Longhorn Publishers in Kenya and Brian Gilsenan from CJ Fallon in Ireland. I wish to thank the Commission and in particular the Directorate General for International Partnership for this opportunity. So a few words about my two panelists before I give them the floor. Maxwell is a CEO at Longhorn Publisher. Its position is held for the last 4 years. He's also in the membership of committee of the International Publisher Association. Remember the acronym IPA. You may hear it a couple of times this afternoon. Maxwell is also a member of the governing council of the Kenyan Publisher Association. Before he joined the publishing industry in 2016, he served in various positions as PricewaterhouseCoopers in Kenya and South Africa. The publishing house he is managing is a pan-European publishing house with market in the East African region and subsidiaries in Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, while with distribution partnership in Malawi, Cameroon, Zambia, Namibia, and Senegal. Wow, it's an impressive list of countries. Brian is the CEO of CJ Fallon since 2008. He is on the management committee of the Irish Educational Publisher Association. Is vice chair of the International Publishers Forum of the IPA. I told you you needed to remember that acronym. And his publishing house is one of the longest established and most respected educational publishing house in Ireland and a leader in primary and post-primary publishing since 1895. That's quite an impressive history, Brian. So a few words about the organization I represent. It's the umbrella organization for 29 national publisher association in Europe, all over Europe, and our members are publishers of books, of learned journals, but also of educational content in all formats. I'd like to start with asking a question to both Maxwell and Brian about what it is to be either a pan-African publisher, as I can see your publishing house is, or an Irish publisher for Brian. How large are your markets? Do you serve very different population, or is it somehow homogeneous? And I'd like also to hear you talk about the way you differentiate the professional work you're doing with authors and bringing content to the students and the teachers and open educational resources. I'm sure that the audience of this panel must have heard several calls for open educational resources, and I think it's important that they understand the difference between professionally published content and open educational resources. So if that's not too many questions, I would like to start with Maxwell and then Brian. So Maxwell, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. And thank you for having me for this session. So I'll first cover the market I represent at the moment, that is Kenya. Kenya is predominantly a textbook market, so educational materials are the main kind of materials that we sell in this market. The estimate of the market is around $100 million US. So that's the total value of the market across all publishers. There are over 100 publishers in Kenya, so the market is quite fragmented, with no single publisher having more than 20% market share. So it's very evenly spread out. Now, the situation is a bit different in the other countries. I take care of around 10 African countries from the subsidiaries we've set up across, and the markets in the other countries combine the 9 countries, which are Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Malawi, Zambia, Senegal, Cameroon. In total could come to around $60 million. So a much smaller market combined compared to Kenya. So the high-level setup of the market is mainly, we mainly serve public schools. So these are government-sponsored schools, which mainly account for around 80% of the market, with the remaining 20% being private schools that are mainly using the local curriculums in the country. We have not ventured into the international curriculum space, which we leave to multinationals. I think maybe I'll just pause there, and then you can follow it up with other questions.
So maybe, Brian, you can talk to us about the Irish market, and then I would like to hear both of you speak about the added value that you professional publishers bring to the teachers and the students. But Brian, tell us a bit about the Irish market, please.
Okay, and thanks, Anne. And like Maxwell, I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I'm happy to be here to talk about education publishing in a much smaller market than Africa. So the Irish market is a population of about 4 million. There's about 6 million on the island, or 5.5 million on the island, but we don't deal with Northern Ireland because it is part of the UK curriculum. And I think that's a key message that you'll hear from Maxwell and myself through the hour, is that the importance of a national curriculum relevance. So each local publisher in each European or international country, it's so important to be local in your market. So of the 4 million population, we have about 1 million students at school-going age, which is in Ireland from 5 to 18. There's about 70,000 teachers, roughly split between the primary sector and the secondary sector, and about 4,500, roughly 4,500 schools. Some schools are in rural areas and may have 2 or 3 teachers only, and maybe 80 or 90 pupils or less. The majority of schools will obviously be in urban centres, and some are quite big. And really, the market is dominated by 4 good, long-established players. Some publishers like CJ Fallon, not many, were established back in the 1800s, so 1895, when CJ Fallon was founded, and you know, to provide educational resources. And ever since then, it has been doing that and nothing else. So we've never evolved into a general publisher. And that gives a great credibility in the marketplace. And again, I think that's such an important aspect of educational publishers, is the credibility and the confidence that they give to teachers, who are the customer. Teachers are the main people we serve. Through them, the pupils are served. Through them, their parents are served and their guardians. But the teacher is the person to whom we provide services, and to whom we go to get content, and to generate the material and the resources that we create. So again, the local point, what educational publishers are offering is local content for local teachers, written by local teachers, and that's kind of the key thing. Do you want to? That's probably enough in terms of the background, and we can talk about the specific things that the publishers like ourselves are providing, if you want.
Yes, I would very much like to hear both of you tell the audience who may be tempted by the idea of free content flowing into the school and avoiding public spending, why it is important, and it's not just for the wealth of the publishing industry, but why is it important for the teachers and the pupils that they receive professionally produced content and professionally authored content too. So I don't know who wants to start. You, Brian, you seem eager to go, and then Maxwell, if you wish, you can comment too. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, Maxwell, I'm talking too much already. The open education resources, or OERs, or online content provided by whosoever have been with us. So as long as the internet has been with us, and indeed before that in printed form and photocopies and all of that. So publishers welcome, can't do anything about, but don't mind that teachers have, a huge amount of choice in terms of the resources that they select. The one thing that they know from a professional publishing company is that it will be fit for purpose, that it will be politically correct, gender correct, adequately diversified, and most importantly, completely aligned to the curriculum, and will provide the teacher everything they need to get through the curriculum as it's prescribed by the ministry. There is a lot of free resources that get used. Indeed, a lot of educational publishers provide free resources also. So it is not our gift to define to teachers what they use. And a lot of them, if not all of them, will use free material on a daily basis. The reason we, I suppose, can compete and the reason we survive is because of all the ancillary services that we provide. So we are, obviously, all of the content is curriculum specific. And in addition, and really importantly, each teacher will receive a teacher's resource book, a manual, a lesson planning tool, and other really important and time-saving components that are linked with the material and linked with the education resources that we provide, but which facilitate them in tracking how they're getting along with every student, tracking each student's progress, tracking where they are in the curriculum and what topics are proving difficult, what aren't. So there's online assessments, there's offline assessments, there are weekly plans that are provided. And these kinds of facilities tend not to be, the OER tend not to be accompanied by that kind of backup. So while the OER material can be very relevant, very useful, very clever, very nice, very different perhaps than what the publishers are producing, it requires a lot of effort on behalf of the teacher to integrate it, to make sure that it's relevant. Everything would have to be checked in advance. So there's a lot of curation needed. And I think if there's one word that sums up educational publishers, it's really this idea of curation and trust, so that a teacher opens up a book from a professional publisher in their marketplace. They will know, they will just know and be totally relaxed and confident that it's everything they need. Otherwise, it wouldn't be on sale. Otherwise, nobody would buy it. The publisher wouldn't have produced it. If they get something online, they do not have the same confidence, and there's a lot more work. So I think that's a key provision of professional educational publishers or dedicated educational publishers, and that's what sustains the business, and that's what teachers value.
Thank you, Brian. And Maxwell, I would gather that this is the same for you, but can you share a little bit your experience on that?
Yeah, sure. And I do concur with what Brian has said. It's not, we are not in the position to say that free materials should not be used. In fact, we encourage any kind of material that will promote education. However, the main difference between ourselves as mainstream professional publishers as compared to companies that offer open source materials is the additional services. For example, in Kenya, what we do provide is teacher training, continuous teacher training, which we do either quarterly or half yearly, where we look at specific sections of the curriculum and provide additional guidance. And we use different statistics. We look at the outcome of national examinations, and we see there's a certain area where learners are struggling. So we use this as a basis to bridge the learning gaps through training the teachers. We also support with continuous assessment materials. These are materials that they will be using for their, be it monthly or quarterly mock examinations. That is something that we do provide. So overall, while the open resources will always be here with us, schools, teachers, learners will always go for mainstream publishers' content, like ourselves and CJ Fallon, as Brian had said, due to the trust of the brand and the experience, knowing that you've been in existence for so many years. So we'll keep on encouraging that, but we know our position is secured by the trust that we've created over the years.
Thank you, Maxwell. And well, you definitely have convinced me. I hope you convince also the governments who have to allow this choice. And I think it's an important matter for publishers on both continents. But let's move and let's talk a little bit about digital learning. Obviously, the pandemic has had a global reach, and we are well aware that there's been an uptake in digital learning on all continents, not just on our two continents, but on all continents. And with digital uptake, and I'd like you to talk to me a little bit of how this has affected your work, but I also want to put some highlight on a plague that has touched publishing, not just educational publishing, but publishing altogether, is piracy. And I'm quite happy to report, and maybe Maxwell can start by saying a few words about it, that in Kenya there was a draft proposal to remove any possibility for publishers to remove pirated content from the platforms. And the good news is that at a parliamentary hearing, those provisions have been removed. But can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because the law in Kenya was a very good law, and it should be an example not just to Africa, also to the European Union. And what was the threat, and or did it reach a better conclusion? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the law specifically was around the copyright. It's a copyright amendment bill, which has very good provisions, but there was a proposal to remove sections 35 B, C, D, which talked about the liability of the internet service provider, ideally saying that if somebody infringes your copyright, they take your product, put it on the internet, give it for free or whatever, you as the owner of the copyright, you previously you could be able to go to court, get a takedown notice instructing the internet service provider to take down that material upon providing evidence that that is indeed your copyright. That law was being repealed, so which was going to be very dangerous, ideally meaning anybody can take your content, put it online, and there's nothing you can do about it. So thankfully, through the pressure that we have put on the government, jointly, Kenya Publishers Association and the International Publishers Association issued a joint statement showing the negative effect of that bill. And we are thankful that the bill was pulled back. So that proposal has been withdrawn, and for now, I think we are now safe. The laws do protect publishers. It's something, looking at the COVID period, one of the things that immediately struck us as publishers is how quickly our content that was available in books was now available on WhatsApp, in WhatsApp groups. People would take a copy of your book, scan it, and share it for free. So that ideally meant you are denied of your revenue, and people didn't see anything wrong. They're saying it's a book, it's free. So there needs to be a lot of sensitization of the public that written material, educational material is IP, it's intellectual property. Somebody has worked hard for it, and it should be protected with the same vigor as we see technology companies or pharmaceutical companies protecting their intellectual property. Books should not be treated any lesser. Back to you.
I fully agree. I couldn't agree more. Brian, has there been the same level of piracy in Ireland for textbooks? And then I would like you to go into what are the changes that have been induced by the pandemic and the fact that students had to study from their place.
Okay. Obviously, it's hard to monitor piracy. By the very nature of piracy, nobody knows about it except the people that are doing it. So I don't think it's a major problem. And once photocopiers became as sophisticated as they are, almost before the internet, or where you could take a book apart and feed it into a photocopier and create a PDF of it, and then circulate that to whoever you wanted to. So piracy almost predates the internet in its own way. And in Ireland, it's there's a huge amount of photocopying of resources takes place, but they don't last a week or two. You send a stapled page or series of pages home with a child, and in a week that those pages are torn. They do not last. And photocopying obviously serves a purpose, and using multiple resources uses a purpose. Whether you buy them, borrow them, receive them from another teacher, get them online. All of these resources add to the mix. Publishers can only control what they control, and we work closely with the Copyright License Authority here. There is a license and a good system for each school where they're entitled to photocopy 5% of one book for distribution, where or a chapter, and that is a given, and that's accepted. It's often abused, but not on a massive scale. And in many cases, the cost of photocopying and distributing a book would be greater than the cost of buying the book and giving it to each child, which they would have it for a much longer period and even get reused over years and years. So I don't think the copyright or the piracy issue is as strong in Ireland. But as I say, we may not know. But what we have is a very vibrant educational publishing market, and a very valued one, as in it's valued by teachers. So they know resources can't come for free, and quality resources need to be supported. And there is at least a sense of that, even though a lot more. My own children have arrived home with photocopies of our own books, even though there's a competitor book being used in that subject. So they will take bits of other, of multiple textbooks. And maybe one subject is treated, one topic is treated better in one particular book over another. So the teacher may photocopy that particular section of another book, even though it's not the prescribed text for the classroom. So there's lots of variations of it. I think probably the African situation, and it's great news that the government have changed their direction over there. I think it's not as big an issue in Ireland, but something we always need to be careful of. And how to protect ourselves is by producing such excellent quality content that it's worth the effort. It's worth the purchase. It's worth having. It's well produced. It's quality. It has long-term life, and there's a lot of resources backing onto it. So it's not a non-issue, but it's not a crisis.
So let's stay with you, Brian. I mean, 2 years ago, I was going to say a year, but actually 2 years ago, suddenly people had to stay home, students had to stay home, teachers had to provide digital material because we were all stuck by the pandemic. How did you have to adapt? What did you do? What were the sort of differences that you saw from pre-pandemic to the during the pandemic, and maybe what's happening now, where things seems to be calming down a little bit?
Okay, I think I probably can describe what seemed to happen in most markets that I've been exposed to, is that most of the educational publishers, if not all, made their material available online and took down their paywall, or made their material available to everyone, so parents and pupils at home. Obviously, teachers had access to it anyway. So by lowering the paywall and making everything available, that was the first thing that facilitated a migration, and a very quick one, to online learning. So one of the big advantages is that teachers who were not, hadn't really thought about online learning, suddenly in the space of a couple of weeks from March 2020 or April 2020, had to work out how they could communicate to the schools. And suddenly Zoom, which we were all sick of but nobody had ever heard of, in March 20 became the communication tool of the age. So it's been a very good experience for publishers, because they have participated in a migration online at a crisis and an emergency time. And teachers learned an awful lot about the merits and the bad aspects of teaching online. There is excellent advantages to ebooks and to having a facility to access a book on your screen, and all of the accompanying embedded interactives and video links and web links that may be associated with each page or each book. But it is not. It does not replace classroom learning. It does not replace physical interaction between teacher and pupils, and pupils and pupils. So we feel that the teaching community grew 5 years in technical ability over the space of 1 year. And there are some very useful things that have come out of it. One of them is an increased awareness of the range that each educational publisher provides. And a lot of teachers, certainly a lot of parents and pupils, would not have been as familiar with the depth of resources that lie behind each textbook or each page of each textbook. So that's been useful. So it hasn't led to a big cry for online teaching to replace classroom teaching. Probably the opposite. But it is useful that people can now cope with online teaching. Maybe children are sick, maybe children with extra requirements can receive more tuition online and be facilitated that way. So it's been positive. I dare say the COVID experience has been somewhat positive for teaching. It's enhanced the value of a teacher and the person, the teacher, the person, and it's shown the importance of proper resources and proper educational resources that are well structured and available in multi-format.
So thanks, Brian. And has the, if I may call it like that, the journey in Kenya and in the other countries in Africa that you are working in, has it been similar, Maxwell, before and during the pandemic?
Yes, definitely. Kenya being the biggest. We do have an e-learning platform, the Longhorn e-learning platform. And the first thing that we noted immediately the lockdowns were put in place was what I would call COVID-driven digital transformation. Everybody realized that they needed a digital resource. While the hardware gap was quickly closed, that is getting a laptop, a tablet, that was the easiest gap to close. The most difficult gap was the content gap. So we did have our platform with content, but soon we realized that we need more content. So in order to have a successful digital learning experience, digital content must be there in plenty. And developing digital content is expensive. It's not like developing a physical print book. So it has, for ourselves as publishers, we started thinking differently about how do we develop digital-first content. which is a big challenge trying to transition from traditional publishing. We did manage during that period to partner with a large telecommunications company. We availed our platforms for free for a period of 3 months. And within the first week, we had over 250,000 learners using our platform. So the partnerships with the telecommunication companies, the largest ones in Kenya, enabled learners to access a free data bundle that would enable them access our platform for free. So that meant the connectivity wasn't an issue, content wasn't an issue. So going forward, I think what you're seeing is a move towards blended learning, which is a mix of digital learning and your normal classroom learning. You cannot substitute physical contact or physical learning in classroom. You can't substitute that, but you can supplement that with digital learning and ensure that value is in the form of analytics, statistics, how are learners accessing certain contents, what is the outcome. That is the real value add of digital learning. And back to you.
But now have you moved into a paying service, or is it still free?
We moved to a paying service after a period of around 6 months. And we are seeing traction picking up. There is a congestion of the school calendar because children have to recover close to 12 months lost. So we can see from our statistics, the learners are engaging with our digital platform at night. So after class, maybe between 6 and 7 p.m. or weekends. So it's still not a core part of the normal day-to-day learning yet, but we hope we'll get there.
Thank you. Anything you want to add on digital learning, Brian?
Just the sense that the world would change, and once digital learning emerged and we could find communications tools that would enable each child to access the instructor or the teacher, that things would change forever. And I think possibly that has, there was always a blend. People talked about a blend, but I think now more than ever, each device, whether that's a book or a electronic device, has its place, has its role, and it will always be that blend. But teachers are much more comfortable online, and that's always a good thing, because it's definitely easier for publishers to provide content online. We do everything as publishers digitally, so we design and we create everything that we produce digitally. Some of it stays digital, but a lot of it gets sent to a printer somewhere, and then is trucked all around every country in Europe and in the world, and it's not particularly environmentally friendly. So if we could find a balance between producing content in physical form, as in paper, and effective content digitally, then that's going to be the way it will continue for a long time. Paper will be. It doesn't depend on connections and connectivity. It doesn't depend on a child's ability to have a device available to them, etc. So there's the people who thought it would very quickly change to a digital world, I think realize that there's nothing terribly wrong with a well-organized blend.
Let's hope you're right, and let's hope we don't have to go back to this fully digital world before a long time. But that's a wish that everyone has behind their screen as we are speaking now. If you don't mind, I'd like to go back with both of you on the importance of locally produced content, and I will start with Maxwell because. And I don't know whether this is very politically correct, what I'm going to say, but I'll say it anyway. It's been my impression that for a very long time, most of the support that we were giving as Europe was to ship French, Portuguese, English books in Africa and sort of flow your market with Western-made content. While I really truly believe that local content is important. It's important even in Europe. I'll give you an anecdote. I have a friend who is an educational publisher in Malta, and he was trying to import, the government imported British books because it was cheaper, of course, than to produce Maltese book, which is a minuscule. Ireland isn't the biggest of the European country, but Malta is truly a very small country in terms of number of inhabitants. And then they were explaining to primary students I think it was languages, but it was showing the landscape of Britain, which is totally different from the Maltese landscape. And it was really not, it wasn't working for the student, and they realized that they needed their own material. So, Maxwell, what would you tell our audience to convince them that it's important that African publishers have a true role to play to provide local published content? The floor.
So I'll give it. I'll give you two perspectives of it. As Longhorn in Kenya, we have tried to export the Kenyan developed material to our neighboring countries. And it has failed miserably. These are countries within East Africa who have mainly the same kind of culture. But like you said, one of our books, we took it to Uganda. The questions are: the terrain in Kenya the terrain in Uganda is very hilly, green. Where are these books from? So I really understand where you're coming from. What we've eventually decided is we develop content for each country using the teachers and the authors from that specific country. I have seen in some of the African countries that I've been working in, I have seen a lot of European books, especially Francophone African countries, French-speaking countries. And you do see the struggle, especially for the language, the language books, which you can see these books are maybe they're European books. So the challenges that I've seen in those countries is learners struggle with the pedagogy, the form of language used to deliver the teaching. The books are a bit too sophisticated, too complex for the level of learning in that country. So it's imperative. It's really important for publishers to go to a country, use the authors in that country. And I know the challenge that a lot of multinationals face or European publishers face when they want to do business in Africa. They maybe don't have boots on the ground, or they maybe don't want to invest that much resource in the country. So my plea is it's time to invest in Africa. It's time to put your boots on the ground, use local people to develop content and marry that with the high quality that you've been producing in Europe, and you'll get a product that fits the purpose. Thank you, Anne.
I couldn't unmute myself. You're jumping a little bit to my next topic, but let's stay with the locally produced content. And well, as I said, Brian, in the case of Ireland, there's obviously a very large neighbor, and that neighbors produce excellent content, educational content in the same language. So why is it important for Irish students to study with Irish textbooks?
Thankfully, it is really important to Irish teachers to use Irish-generated learning resources. there's a couple of reasons. The curriculum specificity, even though the Irish curriculum has looked around and seen what the UK curriculum, how it's structured, has looked at the Australian curriculum, has looked at various European curricula, the US, etc. So it would have taken influence from other systems and other education systems around the world. It is a very unique and its own national curriculum. And a UK company that has a very good math series for the UK, mathematics series, will not and has not found it easy, I say this thankfully, to put their content on the Irish market. And it's little things where that make all the difference. So if there's a slight difference between when decimalization points are introduced in mathematics, whether that's at 8 years or 9 years, if the Irish system is slightly different than the English system, then that's the English book and series, inoperable and inappropriate and ineffective. So our job as publishers down through the ages, because this is not a new development, Irish publishers have always managed to provide for the needs of Irish teachers, mainly by using Irish teachers, obviously, to create the material, to author the content. Every country that I know of has a real reliance on local content, and teachers want to be able to address topics that are relevant to the pupils in their classroom: local rivers and mountains, local cities, local weather effects, curriculum-specific stages in mathematics or in history, geography, whatever it might be. History is a good example. But I've heard educational publishers referred to as the cultural foot soldiers of Europe. So each country has its own culture, and publishers, by being indigenous to that country, are promoting and giving length and longevity and credibility to that culture. The only thing I'd add is that the influence of good quality material filters in to each country, so that while the authors would all be, in our case, Irish, we would look at Canadian and American and Australian and UK textbooks and see, and take best international practice in terms of pedagogy or structure or even design and outlay and all of those things. So each publishing company that I'm aware of around Europe is as professional as the next one, but they're doing it for themselves. They're doing it specifically for their market, and that is what's so important to teachers. I think there's a cultural aspect that teachers want. They want content produced by their colleagues, not by international colleagues, or not containing references or even spellings that may not be in use or relevant to the country they're in.
Well, that must be music to the ear of the European politicians, which are listening to us, because, the motto of Europe is united in diversity, and our best to exemplify that diversity than to have our students being able to learn from their roots and from their very own country. And the same thing applies to Africa. And I wish it was a worldwide motto, united in diversity. That would be a good one. I don't know, maybe we should pitch it to a United Nations agency. But is there for both of you a role for government in sustaining this locally produced and local publishing sector? Maybe I start with Maxwell. Do you see a role for the African governments to support?
Yes, indeed, there is. There are some of the practical things that the Kenyan government has done, for example, in this market, is to ensure that in the authorship of the books that are approved, the people authoring the books must be Kenyans. In a few other countries where we operate, more than half of the authors must be locals. So those are regulations that ensure that you develop local authorship. Other than that, other things that the government can do is provide subsidies for things like the withholding taxes on royalties, because authors earn royalties from that. So reducing the taxes around that makes it more lucrative to be an author and more rewarding. Thank you.
And for Ireland, what can the Irish government do to support, or what are they doing already?
Yeah, never enough. What we would, I think, the best educational systems in terms of the best learning outcomes, and if the PISA ratings are a measurement, then the countries that perform the best are those that have the most cooperation between ministry and publishing sector. So the ministries and the departments of education in each country can do a lot more to become more connected, and to allow themselves to become more connected with the educational publishing community, if you like, because that way, I mean, effectively they set the curriculum, and then it's left to the educational publishers to produce relevant material. Some countries have a vetting procedure or an approval system. That's not so common in most European countries, but I know it's common in lots of markets, which slows everything down, and it means that the department, the relevant ministry, can make sure that the content is appropriate. But in a competitive environment, the market makes sure that happens, where teachers see something, they don't like it at all, it's not relevant, it's not something, and they'll just drop it and move to something else that is more appropriate for them. So the ministry can become more open to sort of dialogue and interaction with the educational publishing community, and that anywhere it happens, it produces better learning outcomes.
Well, I'm sure that if they are not listening to us right now, I'm sure we'll make sure that they get the information and they get that recommendation when we send them afterwards. And also, I think that it's something that as far as Africa is concerned and our partnership, it's something that the Directorate General for International Partnership should be aware of. I don't see whether we have questions or not, so I'm going to continue asking you questions for the few minutes we have left. And we've been invited to organize this session in the context of an African European conference, and obviously educational, as I think we've proven well enough, has a very local foothold. But nevertheless, publishers do meet in different fora, book fairs, and different organizations. The International Publisher Association, as you heard before. But what would be your ideas to improve the cooperation between the two continents? What do you think we can improve in terms of cooperation? What do you think we can learn from each other that we haven't done at the moment, and where we could pitch the European Commission and the African Union that they should support us? I don't know who wants to start on that one.
I'll go with it. And so what I see from a practical perspective is the well-developed digital learning experiences in the Western markets. I think Western publishers have shied away from investing in digital literacy in Africa. And I'll go with that story that is told of a man sent to sell shoes in an African country, and came and two men sent. One reported that the people there don't wear shoes, so there is no market. Well, the other one said the people don't wear shoes. We need the first container immediately of shoes. So digital literacy is still not there in Africa. there is a lot of hunger for it. So it's high time that Western publishers who've already developed digital literacy, well-developed content, try and partner with local publishers in Africa to develop digital content that is the highest quality. I can assure you the infrastructure such as connectivity is going to follow very quickly. Immediately there is content. That's my view. Thank you, Anne.
Brian, any thoughts about the cooperation? You heard Maxwell call for more European investment and partnership with African publisher. That's something, well, how would you react to that?
I think it's very exciting for any publisher to be developing a close connection or a relationship with a publisher in a different market. There's very little competitive sort of tension between countries, because really, as we've said so many times this morning or this afternoon already, there is the content is so local that our maths program is not a threat to UK publishers, no more than theirs is a threat to us. And I think every publisher would be very happy to if there was a way to partner or to twin with an African publisher. Why not? Would be my own view. I think the Irish case is interesting because we were a very poor member of the European Union in the 1970s, even the 1980s, and we've suddenly become, certainly one of the more wealthy countries in Europe, and our performance in the last 30 years has been an extraordinary growth from being very poor to being quite sophisticated now, quite a financially secure and well-off country. And we had the benefit, and this is the message really to the African market, even though I'm not familiar with it, and I don't want to be sounding in any way patronizing or speaking beyond my limited knowledge, but certainly in the Irish case, we learned an awful lot by looking at countries and regions that were more sophisticated than we were at the time and continue to be. And I think there's an awful lot to be said for that. And sophisticated can mean lots of things, but it's certainly infrastructurally, what have they done? How have they organized themselves? How does the ministry operate? How do the publishers themselves operate? What kind of content do they produce? How do they produce it? So there's learning in almost every conversation you have with a country or a company from a different country. And I would really just encourage as much interaction between the two continents as possible, because why not? Everybody will learn. So I think if there was some form of movement to generate more partnering and more interaction, then that's absolutely that's in everyone's interest.
So I think that this looks like, from both your side, a call to the European Union to and maybe also the African Union, but to help organizing partnership between publishers from the two continents, to learn from each other, to see what sort of investment may be valuable and might end up in creating new partnership. And I think that this can be facilitated because obviously publishers and especially from smaller countries may not have at first the means or the sort of the feeling of necessity to do so before they are enticed to do so. So I would say it's probably a call we can make at a later stage to, as far as Europe is concerned, to the DG international partnership, is that it would be good to create this sort of joint or common understanding of both markets and where lies opportunities for both African and European publishers in each of the markets. We have 4 or 5 more minutes to go, so I don't know whether you have any more to exchange on the matter. Otherwise, I think we could close and let our colleagues enjoy a 5 minutes coffee break before the next session, if they're following a next session. But would you have a few closing words you would like to share with us, Maxwell?
So first, to thank the Federation of European Publishers for facilitating this, and yourself, Anne, for moderating this session. I think it's a very good session that will help many people across the world understand various cultures and find areas of synergy and areas where we can work together. I believe even though the continents are very different, education brings people together. Learning is learning, and we should be able to partner to grow education. Thank you, Brian, for sharing this stage with me. Thank you.
Brian? Yeah, you too, Maxwell, and it's very, very interesting. And I think the educational sector is sort of uniquely capable of international cooperation because there isn't much international competition. Now I know Pearson's and McGraw-Hill may disagree, but they will be in most markets, but they will recognise the importance of the local publishers in each of those markets too, and they will find it hard to certainly to break down the relationship that existing publishers have with their own marketplace. So my point is that because companies are not necessarily competing with other companies in different markets, therefore they can quite happily cooperate with one another and exchange maybe work experience programs where people come from one country, visit another to work for 3 months while one of our people goes to a cooperating company in another market. So there's many ways that this can happen. It can happen at a ministerial level and at an EU level, or it can happen at almost an individual company level. But education publishing will lend itself to international cooperation because there isn't that sense of competing with one another, because we are not necessarily competing in most instances because we are so locally focused. So we would, I think the Irish publishing community, which is already I can speak for, and the EPF, who I represent too, have made good inroads in developing the relationships with the African continent, and I think that will only continue, and everybody should be better for it. So let's hope.
Well, hope is always a good thing, but I think concrete actions are even better. So I think following this panel, we will reach to both Maxwell and Brian and all of their colleagues to come up with practical proposals for the Director General International Partnership, who is organizing this event. It's a first for us to be participating in this week. We had a first panel 2 days ago on journal publishing with 2 publishers, a colleague from South Africa and a colleague from Italy. And this panel, we're very happy to have had this conversation. We hope that the Director General for International, I prefer to say the entire name because I'm very bad at acronyms, for International Partnership, will invite us for the next time they organize an event such as this one. I wish to very sincerely thank you, Brian, and you, Maxwell, and as well as my colleague Domenico, who has been organizing all this event. For me, it's been fascinating. I hope we can make the recording available to a broader audience after the event, because we know that there's always colleagues who are on different time schedule or other. And well, I wish everyone a good afternoon, although you have just 1 minute to make your coffee, which may be a bit short. So good afternoon to everyone, and thanks, Brian and Maxwell. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.